Happy Thursday. How you doing? I gotta leave in a little bit. Uh, I had hoped to do this a little bit different, but unfortunately, when I saw it, I grabbed my phone. I says, "Great!" Said, I can actually show it." The fucking phone was flashing, low battery. It fucking died like a minute into shooting the video. So, but it had to do with the cost of auto repair and something I could really relate to because it happened to me many years ago. Um, on our local news, the only news I watch, local news, weather, sports. Uh, and they have a consumer report on the cost of things, what's changing in business and trends in buying power and all that. And the bit was on the cost of auto repair, how it skyrocketed. And they did an interview report with the owner of a major auto repair center. Not a car dealer, just auto repair, but a pretty big, well-known one. They were talking with the owner, and he's showing what was going on there with cars. And they're showing engines sitting on fucking tables. And he's asking why the engine's out of the car, and he said, well, because it needs a water pump. And they got into it, They said, well, a lot of cars today, you cannot work on them without taking the engine out of the car. And now they don't even come out to the top. They come drop down from the bottom. And I know that happened to me with my 91 Grand Prix SE that I had a long time ago. It was like 3 years old when I bought it. It was nice. It was a step-up model from the base Grand Prix. It had a different look to it. It was actually pretty cool looking. The front end reminded me of the 77, 78 Trans Ams. Like little ground effects on it, a little lower, front little air dam. Dual exhaust, Inside was, real nice. Had like BBS wheels from the factory. Had 60s. I put 50s on it, Goodyear Gatorbacks. 235, 50 in the front, 255, 50 in the back. Give them a little huskier, a little wider meat on them. Car handled great. Front wheel drive. That's when GM went to that front wheel drive platform. Grand Prix, the olds with Chevy Lumina, they all shared the same platform. And they had like a 2.8 liter V6. And they had this one here, 3.4 liter twin cam 24 valve V6. In fact, the engine looked like a Hemi. The plugs went right through it. I think the engine was aluminum, if I'm not mistaken. And the plugs went straight through top of the valve covers. It looked like a mini Hemi, The backside, up against the firewall, you could not get at. You could not get at those fucking plugs. Impossible. Impossible. When I put plugs in, I actually had to fuck up the firewall. I took a pry bar and I went in all those areas where I was going to have to get in. I could barely fit in there. And I pushed it back and I bent the fuck out of the firewall to be able to get in there to change the plugs. I found out some things later on. The engine made some decent power. Front wheel drive, it had a real stiff shifting transmission, real tight, nice. Terrible torque steer. Terrible torque steer. You punch it, you let go of the wheel and the car wanted to jump into the next lane. That's what my brother's car did. The only Mopar that was ever in the family, he had a, what the fuck was it, 88 or 89, one of those Dodge Daytona Shelby Z's with that 2.2 intercooled turbo, 175 horse. Same thing with this guy, he had a 5-speed in it. Terrible torque steer. You had to hold on to that wheel. It was a decent little car. I know they had to drop the Z name after that because I guess Nissan had patent trademark copyright on the, Nissan 300Z, ZX. Anyway, Chrysler had to drop the Z and then they just became the Shelby after that. No more Shelby Z. And one day I'm driving it. I'm going somewhere. I get home, I shut it off. I go back up, go to start it, dead, completely fucking dead. I'm like, what the fuck? Go out, check the battery terminals and everything. Get my wife's car, turn it around, jump it, start it up, it starts up. I go put her car back. I go to a store, maybe 3-4 miles away. Get there, the car's running like shit. It's cutting out. And I'm like, what the fuck? Dies again, battery's fucking dead. I'm like, what the fuck? I managed to get jumped again. Barely got home with it. And I realized this as well. This battery's no good. Get in the wife's car, go to AutoZone, buy a brand new fucking battery, bring it home, put it in, starts right up. Hey, great. Drove it around for like a day. Following day, go out there, yeah, dead again. I'm like, what the fuck? And I said, oh shit. It's gotta be the alternator. It's gotta be the alternator, right? Sure. Sure as shit. It was the alternator. I'm looking and looking. And because it's front wheel drive, it's sitting in there sideways. The front of what would be the front of the engine, you'd be looking at with your pulleys and your water pump and your alternator. It's right up against the passenger side inner fender well. You could not even get your finger in between there. And I can see the alternator. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to get this thing out? Impossible to get it. So I says, there has to be some way. So I called my friend Paul at Paul's Service Center. He works on a lot of cars there. I says, hey, Paul, you know anything about these front wheel drive, Grand Prix, how to get a fucking alternator off that engine, man? It's right up against the inner fender well. He starts laughing. He says, good luck with that, Brian. He says, I can't touch that. You got to take that to a Pontiac dealer. I called a couple other places. They told me the same thing. At that time, they didn't have what just about every repair shop has now. It's called the engine cradle. And that's what they were showing. It's a $5,000 piece of equipment. It looks like one of those scissor lifts that guys get on to get up high. They get that under the car, and that's how they drop your engine down. And on the Grand Prix, the whole front subsection gets disconnected. In that case, they had a real big one, and it had like a jig with like tongues and forks where it fit into the suspension, and the front subsection, it held it like it was made to grab it. They unbolted everything, and they dropped the whole front down out of my car. Engine, transmission, wheels, axles, suspension, everything. Everything came down. Then they walked right up to the engine, put a fucking alternator on it. At that time, it cost me $810 with the tax. The alternator was something like $95, something like that. In fact, those engines, they only produced them for a few years, a couple of years. That was the number one complaint, that it was too tough to work on. Even though all the dealerships at that time didn't have the proper equipment to be able to do what they did. They got away from that engine. But I tell you what, here it is right now. It's on again. You can hear it. I'm on my laptop.
For a Hyundai Elantra. I tell you, they've even had to go to the trouble here of purchasing a $5,000 hydraulic table that helps deal with engines coming in and out. Why is that? Well, not just for replacing engines, but a lot of times vehicles are so complicated these days, they've actually got to take
I'm on my laptop. I want to turn it around.
Would be simple repairs.
Got my phone charging.
That's why, if you take a look at the average cost of repair for a vehicle these days, over $4,500 for the internal combustion engine vehicle, and over $6,000 for an electric vehicle. And that's similar to what's going on here. Andre Shumalo of Shum's Auto
This is what I saw.
Philadelphia suburbs.
Just showing it again.
Mercedes here, fancy vehicle. The water pump went bad, and typically I had a water pump repaired. It's a couple $100, pretty simple to do. Yeah. Not so much here.
Yes.
I put in so many alternators for just the cost of the alternator.
For a water pump replacement. Not anymore, though. These cars are way too complicated to be able to do simple repairs, so a lot of times we have to either remove the engine or remove the whole front end of the vehicle to gain access.
You have to remove the front end. The other thing, these have all got sensors these days, so if you get into an accident, maybe even a simple accident where there was no damage, the sensor somehow gets damaged.
Yes, the sensor gets damaged from just impact. So you look at it, there's no physical damage, there's nothing wrong with it just by looking at it, but it stopped transmitting proper information, so it needed to be replaced. The sensor by itself is $900, and it's about $500 to $600 to install it.
So, an accident that caused no damage, essentially no visible damage, it costs maybe $2,000 to replace, because you also have to reprogram the whole system once the sensor goes bad.
Correct. It caused damage to your wallet.
Yeah. And you talk about replacement or repair or fixing. Not much fixing going on these days. Take a look at the numbers. More than 80% of repairs involve just a replacement, not fixing.
Correct, yes. So we don't usually fix things anymore. You don't take a component apart and try to fix it or refurbish it. You just find a component that has failed and you replace it with a new one.
If you got an old car, maybe dating back to the 1900s, well, hang on to it. That's my advice. I'm Jeff Locke for the Fox.
I'll mute it. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And that was in those dollars back then. It was like $810, something like that, with the tax and everything. And I went there when it was, they were working on it. This was at Alden Buick Pontiac. In fact, my youngest daughter started out there when she got out of college with her degree in marketing communications. She went to work there. She worked in the office, and she did all their online marketing and shit like that, and brought it there. And I saw it, and I walked in, it's like, there's my car with no, just, front body or hood fenders and nothing. I walk right up, and there's nothing in there. Everything was down on this lift, this cradle. I guess now they all have them, But all your small mom and pop shops, they can't work on any of these new cars. They wouldn't be able to. I'm sure they could try to rig something, maybe get a few jacks under there or something and try to get that front subsection out. But chances are something could go wrong. It falls and hits the fucking floor, and now there's more damage. I know a lot of places won't even touch it. They're like, nah. They'll tell you to take it to a dealer, because now dealers have everything they need to service their vehicles, from the manufacturer that they're selling them for. But I remember that, you could not do anything with that engine. I know the Chevy Lumina Z, they had a Z24 or something. I don't know if that was a Cavalier. I know they had Z28. They had a Cavalier Z, a Lumina Z. That engine, was a very good 6-cylinder engine, V6. It made some decent power. It ran well. The problem was you could not work on those fucking things. Even to put plugs in them was a fucking nightmare. I found out later on with that car. I noticed a little something on it that I didn't quite understand why it was there. It's kind of new to me. This was, 1990s technology. I was used to, the cars I had that were, late 60s and into early to mid 70s. That I dicked around with. The motor mount on that in the back, it had something you cracked and you loosened it and you jacked up the engine a little bit and it tilted it up just enough so you could get in the back there and put the fucking plugs in. I didn't know that, so I fucked up all the firewall. I didn't care. It was a nice car. It had a cool look to it. Handled great. It had real decent power for a V6. That was the first 6-cylinder car I ever fucking owned in my life. But yeah, even back then, it had already started. Back in that era where now your average corner, neighborhood garage, could no longer do simple things. If a water pump had let go on that, it would have been the same thing. It was right there next to the fucking alternator, The fan in the front was an electric fan with a radiator. That was facing the way it should, But there was no pulley facing in, a sideways direction that was going to, run a fan off. It had an electric fan on it. Overall, a nice car, nice inside, nice look to it. And right after that, I got rid of it. I got rid of it. Shortly after that, within a couple of months, I kept saying, man, what happens if the water pump lets go? What about, I started worrying, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? I said, fuck it, I sold it. I traded it in, and I bought a Jeep, Grand Cherokee Limited. They had a 6-cylinder. That was the 4-liter. And I had a choice of the V8. I think it was 318, and people don't. You want the 4-liter. Those things are like a tank. They run forever. 318s, the V8s, I've heard they've had some issues and transfer cases and whatnot. And anyway, I didn't know anything about Jeeps, SUVs. I listened to people that had experience with them, and 9 out of 10 of them told me, get the 4-liter. Stay away from the V8. Get the 4-liter. It makes almost as much torque. It's not really much down on horsepower than the V8. And they're like a tank. You can run those things with no fucking oil in them, man, you know. Like that Toyota Celica 20R engine, you know, those things. That I had one in my junk. Winter junk. So, yeah, it's very true, you know. It's what this guy was saying, you know, to replace that water pump on that Mercedes. It's going to be like $2,300, something like that. You know. Anyway, that's it for Happy Thursday video. I got to get going. I'm heading out to the VTH. Have a great day. Have fun and stay safe.